So now that we've got our channels routed and we've got our cavity nice and sanded, the next thing we're going to do is put our template on here, and we are going to rough cut this to size. We're not going to go exact because when I go to glue it up, what I want is I want there to be a little bit of overhang. So I'm not trying to squeeze like the exact perfect outline here. So we're going to rough cut this. We'll then glue the top, and then we'll do the final fine cut, mostly using the router bits, kind of in the same way we dug this, which is, 1/8 at a time. Then you round it over and do all the, the cuts that we want to do on the back. You may wonder why I don't do the neck cut as part of the sort of routing out the body. The reason for that is there's some wiggle in this stuff. Like if that control cavity is not exact, then we're still okay. But you really want the neck to line up with the center line where we've joined our two pieces. So that's why we do that cut when everything's glued together. So next we're going to do the bulk of the cutout of the rough shape on the bandsaw. Usually this can be a fairly destructive cut because you might use the scraps for like sacrificial wood in the planer or the sander, to avoid snipe or something like this. But this chunk right here actually I think would make really nice headstock veneer. So I'm going to try really hard to maintain this. That might be tough. Thick blade, I don't want to go change it. So I'll probably end up coming at this, the curve in here with a coping saw and see if I can save what I can. Headstock veneer material. I've clamped the top to where I want to glue it on the body, and I did a little bit of math because what I really want to do is when I glue it up, I'm going to have nice tight clamping around the edges. I'm going to do some cawls across the middle, but I really want to make sure that this doesn't squeeze out and ooze a bit and get some delamination between the top and the body. So what I like to do is I like to find where the pickups are going to go and then run a couple of shallow screws through those spots because they're going to get routed out anyways once I make holes for the pickups. And then that does two things. One, it makes sure that center really is just nice and tightly clamped down. And the second thing it does is it makes it so when I've put the glue on and I'm trying to line everything up and clamp everything down, if I run the screws through first, it's already exactly in place. Like I don't have to mess with it. I don't have to worry about that, a little pressure on this clamp made it slide that direction or anything like that. So that's what I like to do with my glue-on tops. So I've got my paper template here, and I can do just a quick sanity check. I should see a line about right there, and I do. And I should see a line about right there, and I do. So that's how we'll roll, and that'll be the next step. It's let's drill some holes, run some screws in there, shallow screws, because we don't want to go any deeper than what our neck pocket's already going to be, or our pickup pocket's already going to be. And then we are just about ready to glue. So I drilled my holes. I have basically made a couple of MDF washers here. When you drill holes, you're going to generate sawdust, so you do want to make sure you pull that top off, make sure that this is flat. We don't want any kind of debris pushing up on this. Nice rag. Make sure that all the dust is off both surfaces, that there's no, drilling debris holding that up. And then when we go to glue stuff down, we're slightly lined up. We should end up where we need to be. So the screws will find their place. And that's not going anywhere. Glue time. Crank that down. And then we can casually clamp the rest of it without worrying about it sliding around on us. And we're ready to glue. Fresh bottle of Titebond. Got a bunch of spool clamps I'm going to use around the edges. Before I spread the glue, I'm going to throw a little bit of tape over these channels just so that they don't get filled with glue. And I'll pull that off just before I put the top on. Right. Oh, one more thing I started doing too. I run tape just around the inside edge of this. When I clamp and do the squeeze out, I can come in from the other side and pull the tape off and get rid of any big gobs of goo that I may have made. Now you don't want to crest above the edge. Just put a little bit along here. So any squeeze out doesn't get in that. Especially sort of that end grain stuff too. That gets really hard to clean up. One more dust. Just to make sure there's nothing that's going to keep that from getting a nice tight squeeze. Got a nice clean piece of wood for doing my spreading. Probably got a little bit too much on here. That's okay. We can squeeze the excess over the edge. It's getting routed out anyways. Don't want to starve the joint, but you also don't want too much in here. Nice, even coverage. What we want to go for. Line up just by eyeball. screw find, and see how easy that moves? So that becomes problematic when you're trying to clamp. But if you've got the screws in place, then it doesn't. All right. Now, go around. Now I have done this with just squeeze clamps, but I find these spool clamps do a really nice job, and you can, get a lot of them in narrow areas. I think I bought this, big box of them for like 20 of them for not an unreasonable price. I've seen people online talk about how to make your own. Doesn't appear to be that hard. So there are budget ways to get them too. And we can see little dots of glue coming up through the holes in the burl. Definitely got some gaps in it, so there's probably going to be some, take some black super glue, fill and sand sort of events in my future here. Got the basics. Now it's just time to go around, fill in the gaps. I find neck blanks that I goofed up to be the best calls because they're usually very nice and straight and stiff. And then if I need to give them a little bit of a bow, I'll use a little bit of painter's tape or something like that to make them work a little bit harder. All clamped. Now for the weighting. Clamps are all removed. We've got our nice glued up top. It's time to get it down to the actual size. So we're going to reattach our template here. And then run our typical smaller router bits up to larger router bits, about 1/8 of an inch at a time. Till we get all the way through it. And we already had our lines sort of set up on our top, so we just need to align that. Make sure we're straight. And then we're ready to go. The 1/4 inch bit is already loaded in here. But before I started, I wanted to kind of show you something I do that might be helpful to others. So when you buy router bits, they usually have one bearing. But I find that if I steal the bearings, so they're easy to pull off, there's usually a, like a little stop here, or, keeps them on there. Pull the bearings off old bits when they get chipped or whatever, and then double up on the bearings for the bits that you have. It gives you more area to move up and down on the template, and gives you just a little bit more flexibility and maybe some stability having, 2 bearings running against the template versus just the one. One thing you may have noticed is that when I do my cuts, always cut downhill, so this way and then this way. That keeps helps avoid tear out because there's nothing actually to tear out. You're only cutting and pushing against the piece of wood that you're cutting versus pushing against wood backed up by other wood. So when this bit comes around, it's sort of chewing it out as we move down this stack. Same way on this one, as it's chewing it out going this direction, and I don't have a chance where the bit could spin and then push a chunk of wood out instead of actually cutting it. Anyways, we're going to crank this up just a little bit. Looks about right. Give it a quick dusting off, and then we'll be ready to do next coat. We've gone as far as we can with this router bit, taking about a 1/4 inch off, and we look good. There's we had plenty of wood. We didn't undersize in any bad places. We're going to have to do some interesting kind of fill around here to deal with the gaps in the burl. Now we'll change the router bit. Unplugged already. And we're going to drop it just a little bit because we were already pushed up all the way. Right. Now basically we're just going to rinse and repeat that until we're done. I won't make you watch that. We're almost done here. There's just something I wanted to bring to your attention. At this point, I've moved to a bigger router bit to get the height I needed. So the previous one, the cutting diameter was like a 1/2 inch, and these new ones are 3/4 inch. So that means that the speed at the edge is going to be that much faster. So you may need to crank down your router's RPMs depending on where you are. Too much, you might burn the wood if you're not moving fast enough, but if you move too fast, then you might lose control. So that's just something to play with, and you kind of get a feel for it over time. The other thing I wanted to bring attention to was I did have what looks like a little bit of tear out, but as I kind of poke my finger in here a little bit, it's actually that this was just sort of a punky spot in the wood. I'm not quite sure what I'll do with it yet. It's not that deep, probably 3/16 at most. So I will probably just sand the profile a little bit more and bring that down. It won't be noticeable at all in the final product. I've had to do that before with real tear out, and actually I considered for a time changing my profile to be that because I kind of liked it. But we'll see how that goes. That was our final cut. This is our body blank. So now, of course, there'll be more stuff we need to do. Neck pocket, we'll do pickups. We'll round over the back. We'll kind of do that bevel I like to do for the, right here where the screws go into the neck. We'll have a recess here for the cavity cover, which I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with that yet. Probably see if I can pull a chunk of this stuff and use that for that. Anyways, got a couple places where we need to fill in some gaps on the burl. But so far, exactly what I was hoping for. If this is the kind of content you like, be sure to like and subscribe. And we'll see you at the next one.